this man has preyed and just destroyed people. I still have nightmares. I have nightmares of sort of mounds of white, revolting flesh and skin with paws like bloody black volcanoes, sort of stuffed with crusted pus, and that's the sort of language you should use. So if that's someone's idea of a relationship, well, it certainly isn't mine. I had started work when I was 16. I'd bought my first flat. I had met someone I was madly in love with, who I then married. And I had amazing friends, and we had fun. I was sent out on my own to do a big press launch, and that's when I was made to go and have dinner with Harvey Weinstein.
And how old would you have been then?
I'm terrible. I'm actually slightly dyslexic and I get really muddled. But I would have been about, I think I was 18 or 19, something around then.
And when you say you were made to go and have dinner with him,
well,
how does that...
This is a really, really weird story. And I was there to do a press junket and meet journalists. Harvey was, at that point, a rock journalist. Nothing to do with the film industry, nothing to do with our industry whatsoever. And I was literally handed over in the lobby and told, you have to have dinner with this man. And outside was one of those ghastly horses and carriages. It's like clearly being positioned on a date. And I got in and he talked and talked and talked, told me that he wanted to get into the film industry, that he and his brother were setting up this company named after his parents, and that his big dream was to do a musical with Barry Manilow. Yep. And then we got to the inn on the park, and I just thought, no, this all feels a bit weird. So I said, I'm sorry, and we went back, and we must have exchanged numbers because that was the last time. The next time I remember was meeting him in London. But it's only years later I've just realised, when all of this stuff is having to put all the piece it together for myself more than anybody else, and just go, oh my God, how dare that woman hand me over to that man? I was a child. What the hell was that?
I mean, at that time, it didn't feel weird, or did you just think, I have to do this, this is part and parcel of my job?
I've been working for a while, I've been working for a few years, and you do as you're told, basically, believe it or not, actors do, but no one had ever breached that trust. You know, if you go for an interview, you go for an interview, and you're looked after, and that's the journalist's job, and that's the actor's job. So to be made to ostensibly go out on a date was just perverse.
Did it feel like a date? It didn't feel like a business meeting?
The Horse and Carriage was a rather unusual place for a business meeting. So that's why when I got to the inn on the park, I just went, said, no, I've got to go back, sorry.
And then what happened after that in terms of, at one stage, you've spoken about how over the next year or two, you sort of became friends? We became
very good friends. To be honest with you, from this point on, I'm told it's trauma, but the way my memory works is it's like you take a massive glass and you've smashed it down, and I can pick you up pieces and describe those pieces, but I haven't quite put it together. So I would have lunch, people would come over for lunch at the weekend, or some friends, but I don't remember Harvey ever being in my flat, other than friends tell me that he was, and they all remember him, didn't like him. We're going to see films, just what normal people do.
And it was a friendship?
It was a friendship, and in fact I was fantastically flirtatious, and the big memory of my friends was I never ever, why would I flirt with that? I was never flirtatious. People talk about him being incredibly charming, and he is, and he's brilliant, and he's was obviously passionate and driven, and was mad about film and had dreams, and I really got on. And I think also I was used to being around men, worked with men, and had a boyfriend, and no one had ever, people make passes, or people might get a bit handsy, but that was it, just no, bugger off, end of.
But this man you described as a friend, when did that change significantly?
I have this memory of one morning in my little basement flat, just suddenly seeing this, he's always fat, fat lump of a man stumbling down my very steep little steps. And after that, it's like I'm behind my own head, if that makes any sense. I see it from the end of the corridor. He knocked on the door. It was in the morning. I only had a dressing gown on. He pushed me against my coat rack, and he raped me. I just, he was heavy and fat, and just trying to get him off and just giving up. And that's that bit. But that was the easy bit. That's what came next, and that's the bit I've not talked about. I've obviously, with all of this and making this decision to fight him, people would describe me as someone who certainly talks a lot, but is always... I've never been shy of sharing or telling what's happened, or, just being communicative. But I've never, ever spoken of this because the shame. And I've thought about this a lot in terms of, I think there's a type with all these 80-plus women that we are all basically nice, kind of middle-class girls. And the thing about nice middle-class girls, we're taught that we're in control. I remember Mother Superior saying, "You hold the reins." I made myself laugh the other day, and I thought, moral of the story is don't take sex education from the woman dressed as a crow. But anyway...
This is at the convent
This is at the convent, yeah. And girls like me, the girl I was, the only way you can process something like that is to, if it's your fault, then you can correct it. It takes the control back, but of course it doesn't.
Just the event itself, you say, you gave up fighting. You knew him. It's perhaps a ludicrous question. Were you frightened at that stage?
I was just
Or
flattened.
confused, or...
Do you know, it's funny because I would really like to use language that we can't use on for obvious, reasons. But this isn't about sex. This is about domination and control. This is a man who, if he wanted to have, well, basically could have bought anything even by that point. Could have had women who would gladly have done anything, other than the one thing that's quite tricky, especially as you get more and more famous, is to find someone who's really frightened of you. That's a particular niche desire. You can't buy it, and you certainly can't fake it. And he likes... I went from, if you see pictures, from being... I can say that now I'm 56, this very beautiful, sweet thing, into I got fatter, and I just used food just to shove it down, because that's when it started, and it was a horror. It was a horror. He just wouldn't leave me alone. And I would be summoned, and he would call. I'd ignore the calls. I'd call more calls. Then assistants would call, and then assistants would call, and then my agent would call. And at this point, things were going well for me career-wise, and I'd been signed up by a massive American agency. And then at midnight, you get the head of the agency calling, saying, "You've got a meeting with Harvey Weinstein, why wouldn't you go?"
I mean, you said previously that it hadn't occurred to you to ring the police. There hadn't been a knife, he wasn't a stranger. In that moment, did you know you'd been raped? No,
I think that's a very pertinent question. Jermaine Greer loves to scream about, this is just bad sex. That's the one thing I'm trying to say. It's another terrain. You're sullied, you're marked, absolutely marked. And it triggers in me, and I think it's listening to other people talk, girls like me, a sense of such shame.
Why do you think you felt shame, and not that he had wronged you?
Because, again, that's I don't know. I remember lying in the bath afterwards, and I have again this memory of just my feet on the tap and just thinking, well, it's all right, I guess. Just don't want that to happen again, but that's rape. It's like I said, there's no knife, there's no... It's just move on, just leave it, move on. I've put out, in some way I must be responsible. I must have sent the wrong message. And if I say anything, that's exactly what it will be said. So and that's the way I've coped, and coped for the years afterwards, is I brazenly would look people in the eye and say, well, you know what he's like, but I'm the one who got away.
But he pushes you through the door. He's, as you say, he's a big man. There was no doubt in your mind that you were somehow to blame for this.
If you have a secret, even from yourself, for all of these years, I haven't even tried to unpick it that much, other than if I didn't feel so responsible or just disgusted, and also a little bit of me obviously broke then, trust and all of that stuff. But what do? Also, I was going through a lot of other stuff. My mother was very, very ill. And had she found out, she was already had been sectioned, and mania, I don't know what the language is now, but anyway, at that point would be all around. It was very heightened sexual things. She would believe that people were making pornographic films of me.
How did you cope that feeling of, when you describe that disgust, it's visceral still? So how did you cope with that, not being able to
I don't want to be here talking to millions of people. My son's 15. I've got an amazing job. But I'll do it if it makes people realise that this man who's now using languages about one of the very brave girls who's going on trial in New York, you know, is a long-term lover. That. We're not long-term lovers, no. Liverpool or not, sorry. But... And I think also being an actress, and this is obviously very gender-specific, this story, people just love to knock us down, and that's what his defence is using. You know, there's some sort of, I suppose, some sort of jealousy of what, I don't know, try getting out at 5 every morning, try it, you know, whatever. It's very isolating. And he was king of the isolation. But to be an actress and to be at that age very pretty and have a mother who did her best, but basically I'd been brought up by by nuns. I wasn't ready for that kind of world.
And it's difficult to overstate how important he was in that world at the time, because you carried on having to see him in different ways.
I think one of the things that really infuriates me is people treat acting as though it's like some hobby. That if that happens, then walk away, get another job. But it's not. It's a vocation, and it's something. I'd love one day that all the TVs and movie theatres and everything in the world just shut down, and people realise how much their lives depend on us to write their worlds, but also, try it. Most people can't do it, let's face it. But there's this lack of respect. I don't need respect, but there's, like I said, well, if someone's going to do that to you, then just give it up, do something else. No, why? Haven't you taken enough from me? It would be my thing to him. And I just knew that if I put my blinkers on and just kept moving forward, I'd get out, but it took me 10 years.
When you decided to speak out, that cannot have been easy. You're one of the first women, I think, to speak out.
I'm the only woman in England. And again, I say, why? Why? I mean, people should be bloody ashamed of themselves. And I'm not the only one. But why in England? Why is no one else standing forward? And there's an awful lot of people who've gone quiet. And if I only use their first names, you know exactly who I was talking about. But it's like you really want to say, just shame, cowards. What, just in case they might not get another job someday, because someday maybe he comes back, or again, it must be her fault, because having sex with Harvey Weinstein, wow, that's something to look forward to.
What did it feel like seeing him again after the attack?
I don't remember. I just know that the next phase then began, and there's pictures of me at Cannes, and this little round face. And I remember him bumping into him on the Croisette. Got quite a lot of the Croisette. He was getting fatter by the minute. And him literally waddling after me and pushing me into my little room. I was there with a film I had coming out, and raping me. But, you know, again, you know, what's anyone going to say if some aspiring actress is going to accuse of someone who is in position of ability to not just employ them, but change their world? It must be her fault. Poor fat Harvey, these lovely girls just throwing themselves at. I was frightened of what he'd do to me, and I just thought if I didn't have a career, I would have lost my flat because I wouldn't have been able to pay for it. I'm dyslexic. I've been an actress since I was 16. What else am I meant to do? I'm a terrible, wouldn't be a horrible secretary. This is basically being some form of slave. I have nothing to show for it, so it's clearly this was not a joyous communion of, I wasn't his lover, I wasn't his, what was I? I was this person who he absolutely could guarantee was so filled with self-disgust and disgusted in him and in the situation and rigid, literally, this is sexy, rigid. And if I kept very still, it would be over very quick, and then he would leave me alone for another half a year.
It never occurred to you then, I must go to the police at this stage, I must tell somebody? You're holding all of that.
Absolutely not. Because it would just have been turned on me.
You were confident of that?
I listened to the news. You know, I think the rape statistics are still pretty, you know, it's appalling. It's he said, she said. It's a very tricky thing, isn't it? But then, all those hundreds of years ago, it was simple. I mean, you didn't go to, you know, you don't go back into someone's flat, which of course they're using as a defence now. The bit that they're missing out, that there were never hotel rooms. The bit that they're missing out is that actors meeting directors and producers and in hotel suites that could house a small village is normal business practice if they're coming in from out of town. But I'd also met my husband, and I didn't want him to leave me because I was soiled. I know it sounds stupid and it's almost using Victorian language, but yeah. Yeah, sorry.
When you finally decided to speak out, what did that feel like?
Well, I'm in a little bubble here, Hollyoaks. You know, when people that you really admire and love just give you a big hug and just say, you're very brave and I'm proud of you. Then, and people literally coming down from offices or bumping into the corridor, or someone who happens to be keeping our studio beautifully clean who just says, I think you're doing an amazing thing. And my son, so I said, darling, when this is going to come out, you know, people will say awful things. He said, Mum, he said, let's face it, they say them anyway. And
he's young, isn't he?
He's 15.
So that's been fantastic for you to have his support, because he's 15.
Well, exactly, and he's just all that stuff is starting. He's very confident. He knows his mum doesn't lie, and he also has heard 80 plus other people saying exactly more or less the same thing.
And will you keep fighting?
Absolutely.
And the fact that he's saying his work for women is being forgotten in all of this, where do you think he is psychologically?
Where he's always been. man who's been able to buy whatever he's wanted. He thinks he can buy himself out of this.
I just wondered for you, was there an impact on your career?
There definitely was an impact on my career. A young assistant told me that there had been a meeting at said massive agency when I had 5 films coming out, including with Mel Brooks and some award-winning European directors and across the board. And they just said, one day to the next, Lysette Anthony's not worth the push. And then I got called up to my agent's office and he just said, your husband needs to get a job. He absolutely went for my husband. David never worked again. Harvey used to just buy up his scripts. He never, ever, ever worked again. And when we got together, we bumped into Harvey just literally by chance. And he looked at David and he just went, enjoy the ride, kid.
And I just wonder, and this is a tough question in a way, do you ever think, had you come out earlier and spoken,
I'd have been destroyed.
but whether it might have stopped him? It might have prevented other women from...
Oh, I've managed to put enough blame on myself, I think, for a lifetime. No, of course it wouldn't have stopped him. I'd have just been either paid off, that's what he did. I mean, there have been moments when I've been incredibly broke when I thought, oh, might have missed a trick there. No. No.
What would justice look like for you?
Justice would look like guilty. That's all I want. And I don't care about... I mean, obviously, everybody, you know, we work hard. I'm a single mum. Obviously, money in a pot would be very nice. But that's not what this is. That's not what this is at all. I want rapist. I want serial predatory rapist. I want this man has destroyed lives. And at some point... Sorry, but I'm not holding my breath about that one.
You've made a success
Haven't
of your work and your life.
Yeah, I'm very proud of being at, you know, Hollyoaks, you know, and again, British being British, people like to get sniffy about soap, but this is a bloody wonderful place to work, and the work that we're doing is political and important, and we change lives and we support lives, and we also make people laugh, and it's glamorous and it's fun.
So when you look to the future now?
I see laughing, and my son, as a single mother, my God, to be able to know that I can give him a stability, and then so I get to be a mum, and I get to be, I get to have a proper job, and get cross about all the same people most people do in normal proper jobs, and I get to be part of this incredible family, and I'm very lucky and I'm very humbled.
The actress Lysette Anthony speaking to me earlier today. Harvey Weinstein has always denied any allegations of non-consensual sex. We put Miss Anthony's new claims to him today, and his representative told us that allegations are not certainties. They said that Mr Weinstein has the right to due process and the presumption of innocence in his upcoming trial. And if you have been affected by any of the issues raised in this interview, information can be found on the Channel 4 website at channel4.com/support.